Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
So, do I have the screen now, or should I wait a little longer? Are we starting immediately?
Yes, you have the screen ready, and I think we can share. We can start.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, let me just see if I may get a couple of things here ready. Good. Now that this, I hope this was a good weekend for you. Um, Mine was excellent, really. Uh, I got a chance to uh, sit down and watch news, and it was something else. This late developments in the world are for us to pay attention. So we really need to pay attention to what is really happening out there. So well, just a little bit of going back to what was pending from Friday. I left you Friday with some good and clear, I hope, deadlines concerning what was occurring here during the first week. I'm referring to work that you are going to be submitting, right? That work is essentially a reaction paper. I hope you had a chance at least to read a little about what a reaction paper should look like, and the rubric that comes along with it, right? Those documents, I think, will be very helpful and very enlightening in case you haven't uh, done much of that kind of work recently. Well, that's one thing. On the other hand, I also added some new material. Okay, this new material is for a topic that we're going to start developing between today and tomorrow, Tuesday. That has to do with comparative linguistics. Okay. The reason why we will start talking about linguistics and comparative linguistics, which is a subfield, because it's a field that plays an important role in everything we're going to be discussing about translation, and there are some readings that we need to do. Now, this material that I uploaded, it's a very good book, essentially. It's a very good book. We're going to be working on it and training ourselves to do research with translation work. I'm very interested in discussing, during this week with you all, the first unit or chapter of this material, okay? Vasquez Ayora's book, it's a classic in this regard. There haven't been many books concerning comparative linguistics of English and Spanish. So the first chapter is for us to be trained on how to detect meaning units in translation, so that then we can proceed to something called segmentation of work. That segmentation is breaking down sentences into meaningful units, as to, for us to begin analyzing each one of these pieces and then start doing research. Now, this excellent book also contains some chapters on topics that are not very easy to come by, such as stylistics and, well, some others that I think deserve our attention. Because remember, for a program like ours, we are constrained by time and we can focus only on the technical, but it's necessary for us to go into the technical, especially if we're going to be proposing some research topics, as I'm planning to do by the end of this week. Why am I going to do that? I'm going to do that because I'm planning to create a research group at the Vicerrectoría de Investigación here at the university. I think that's a very positive initiative for all those who decided to join the program. And it's also a way for us to get you started with something in this regard. I think it's not happening. We're not paying much attention to translation topics that deserve to be, studied, that could really benefit you in terms of, as I was saying before, producing research that could eventually lead on to paper writing and even book writing, really. We don't have that much in this regard, and we should pay more attention to this because there is a whole niche of research topic that we are not, these topics we are not really doing much, about them. And there is always the opportunity of publishing a book. It's a very good thing to do, very positive. That's what we do in academy. We should try to produce. It's important to produce a book. It's important to produce papers and so forth. So our effort must go in these directions. Okay, very good. So I have to ask you before we start, how has the experience of writing the reaction paper started? Has that been an easy one? Is it something that's giving you a hard time? How do you feel about that? I mean writing the research. Actually the reaction paper. That's what I mean. If there is anybody who would like to comment something in this regard, now is the time.
Well, Professor, good morning. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Your volume is kind of low though.
Oh,
Mhm.
I have, it's better now? I don't know.
Much
Or
better,
it's
yes.
much better. Okay,
Mhm.
thank you. It has been a very interesting experience for me because I have like written different kinds of text, but it was like my first time doing a reaction paper, and it was a good possibility of putting all the ideas together and to reflect on what we have done last week, um, and also contribute to contribute to an experience that I had at the English department, and also sharing my ideas regarding the content that we had done last week. But yes, I think it's like also a kind of reflection, right, that we have to do. Because in the first part, as you said, it's like of an overview, and in this overview, it's necessary to put all the ideas together, right, to summarize what was, at least for me, the main points of the first week. So yes, it has been a something. I really think that it's something that when you learn something new, and it's something pleasant, right? It's different. It's something like you're enriching yourself.
Concerning the book, well, I hope that reading is light. Personally, if you
Yeah.
ask me, I consider this. Yeah, some of the topics he deals with go a little bit, beyond what we are discussing here. But I think you can relate to them very easily,
Yes,
especially
the book, yes,
those
of course.
that have to do with writing letters and these kinds of things, because there's where you find all the nuances of the languages coming together, essentially. So I think, well, it's time for us to invest in reading a little and then writing. I think a reaction paper is scheduled for tomorrow. Just heed the announcement in classroom, the time, and also the date. Essentially, well, this essay that you will write is more important than anything that we've done before. It's probably the most important thing. So focus all your attention in writing that really well, the best you can, and that will do the trick. I think we're going to be safe. Playing safe is writing a very good reaction paper. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you, and please don't forget that. Now, today I need to continue developing our agenda that we have set for the second week. This is a follow-up of Module 2. This brings us now into general linguistics. We will not go into general linguistics in detail very much because translation does not belong really to general linguistics. A translation as a field of knowledge goes into an area, minor area, sub-area of comparative linguistics, as I was saying. Contributions in this regard are kind of scarce. You won't find that many books in comparative linguistics, essentially because that takes a scholar who's very, very good in both languages. And the people who happen to have all this background, they're more into specific concrete projects of their own, more than educating others. So if there aren't any translation departments or offices or academic units that support translation work, there won't be much to contribute in this regard. So this is really challenging because the field doesn't exist in many universities. That's a fact for sure. And we've been talking about that when we mentioned before what occurred in the Iberian Peninsula, and that experiences with translation schools are not very, very common, really. Not during the Middle Ages, Renaissance, and all that. Of course, there were translators and there were also interpreters, but there weren't any scholars devoted to this field. Okay. So this is in linguistics. This is taking us to an important reflection, right? Is translation art or science? Okay. So the scientific part of translation has to do with linguistics, general linguistics, right? And the subfields that could be pulled from, in order to enrich translation analysis. So we all know traditional linguistics involves pragmatics, semantics, syntax, morphology, phonology, and phonetics. And all of these subfields of linguistics are important, of course, but they're not necessarily aligned all the time with translation, or translation doesn't relate to them all the time. In the case of semantics, that has to do with meaning. We have there the relationship between references, right? Reference, linguistic symbols as words, expressions, phrases, and what they call reference. It's a term, reference with a T and reference with a D. The reference in semantics are concepts, so objects they refer. So it's similar to the signifying and signifier kind of relation in semantics, right? Here is a referent and the referend, okay? The referent is the symbol and the referend is the concept. Remember that we have agreed here, and I hope this is a takeaway from this the certificate program, that culture rules language and not the other way around. Okay, we cannot say that language rules culture. Okay, and the reason is because of this exactly. You need to have a signifier, and a signified. Okay, Signifier generally takes the form of some symbol, right? Whereas the signified is the actual idea or concept or rule or behavior that is promoted through that idea. I mean, through the symbols, which are a vehicle and usually symbolic. What is symbolic is the language, right? The language part of this combination, right? In tandem, that they work together to mean something. This is the way our brains process meaning, and we create meaning this way. And in this case, in semantics, there are these two terms which I think are not very familiar, but they're worth paying attention. The referent is a symbol. It's the linguistic words, phrases, and the referents, which are the ideas, right? Now, Larson Naida also established that there are two levels, and this is reviewing what we discussed last week. We have deep meaning, we have also surface meaning. We have to go into the deeper meaning of any idea or word in order for us to fully understand what is meant. This is another field, social linguistics. This is concerning social registers, right? Social levels of language. Language is not the same across societies. We know that there are, human groups in which language is better developed or better regarded because of education and other habits, and it's an important element in analyzing translation. Semiotics, on the other hand, is more, going into signs, okay? For a translator, it's important to pay attention to sign. And if we deal with pragmatics, pragmatic elements are generally, connected to what is communicated and how things are, conveyed, essentially, okay? Now, the relationship between translation and linguistics is further illustrated by this is theory at the core, in translation studies. Now, Roman Jacobson, in most books, influence this thought on how translation and linguistics connect. There are three levels, right? The intralingual, interlingual, and intersemiotic, right? Interlingual translation, I think we all know. I'm not going to be beating around the bush much about this, because I think this is common knowledge. Intralingual is essentially, taking meaning from one language, level to another inside a single language form. So it's more like rephrasing, paraphrasing, and these kinds of phenomenon that occurs inside a language in which you alter meaning, but it's all constrained or limited by a single language. Interlingual translation is translating from one language to another, such as in the case of English, Spanish, Spanish, English. This is interlingual, right? From one language to another, you convey meaning in a completely different system, and that this is something else. You're not rephrasing, you're not paraphrasing. What you're doing is that you are going over the language barriers, and that makes it, challenging in that regard. And this is where I think most of the translation we know or we can relate to is inserted, right? Interlingual. Intersemiotic has to do with symbols, right? Symbolic. So if there is a symbol, color, maybe a shape, a form of some sort, what does that mean without any words or language involved? If there is any meaning ascribed to some element or shape, maybe a shape, color, etc., what does that mean, or how does that communicate meaning, right? That's the part of intersemiotic communication. Now, intralingual translation, essentially, as I was saying, is rewarding, right? Rewarding. It's an interpretation of verbal signs. Okay. Has to do with register levels inside language, like going from formal language to slang, like it is all right to it's okay. In linguistics, they mention it's useful for the sake of modernizing language. So that's one way of saying it or putting it. Interlingual, as I said before, interpretation of verbal signs by means of some other language. Right? You can see the example here. And intersemiotic, it's also known as transmutation, right? Verbal signs by means of nonverbal signs. So as I was saying, colors, shapes, forms, any kind of symbolic element that could mean something else. And you can see here that instead of using a formal language written out or spoken, what we use is symbols, essentially, and colors and shapes and some other elements. Very good. Now, a little bit, into this topic, it's worth bringing this quote from an important thinker, philosopher in translation named Schott. I think that's because I think it's a German name. Translators should be aware that modern linguistics is a new science. Okay, this is important. Why do we say it's a new science? Because everything started with Ferdinand de Saussure, as we will know, and that was just in historic terms, probably like a little bit over 100 years ago, give or take. So it's not an old science that has been. I'm talking about linguistics, general linguistics, as we study it today, as it is studied in universities today. It's relatively new, right? Okay. The core underpinnings of present-day general linguistics come from Ferdinand de Saussure, probably a little bit over maybe 200 years or so. So this is relatively new. However, translation is much older than that. It's been out there ever since people started speaking different languages. And if we go for the religious version of the story, we'll know that there was something at the phenomenon that occurred in mankind, according to the texts in the Bible. Something occurred in the Babel. We don't know, but people started speaking different languages way long ago. And if we go for the scientific or historic version of the story, we know that human groups developed and each one developed their own culture and their own language form, probably due to different phenomena. So there are different explanations to the same issue, but the state of the matter is that people speak different languages, right? And there will always be, as he puts it, unresolved contradictions, right, among approaches to studying languages and analyzing one language or comparing two languages and all of these. So it's worth reading this quote and analyzing, because he has some clarity about what translation and linguistics are like. Quite often a translator turns for help to linguistics in order to solve a specific problem he has encountered in his work. Home, frequently to be disappointed as he does not receive the help he expected. Instead of providing a nice, elegant solution to a particular translation problem, the linguist he consulted gives him reasons why there is no solution, or offers him a choice of approximate equivalents that he could have found without any outside help. So what does this mean? Well, what it entails is that linguistics doesn't provide any answers. So if we're looking for answers to problems, the, the fact of the matter is that we won't find the solutions in linguistics. Solutions are out there in the world, really, and linguistics, as he puts it, will provide some maybe choices, for getting by, but essentially the root problem or root confusion is not going to be tended. So this is something that I think has kept translation as a subfield and not so close to general linguistics. So a lot of information is out there, but we don't get that much help from general linguistics. Well, this takes us into, to language itself. So it's worth the time and the effort to remember some areas that are always the cause of problem for translation, especially of what this certificate program will focus on, which are Spanish, English, English, Spanish dynamics. You see, we have these phenomenons of the use of interjection, expletives, euphemisms, and regionalisms, because this is the way the brain, deals with language and communicates ideas, essentially. So these are troublesome areas in language because they're very contextual. So interjections and expletives. So these are essentially grammatical particles. Single words used to express subjective reactions, okay? These are linked to emotion, right? You see here fears of fear, pain, excitement, etc. In many fields, they're named also fillers in spoken speech, where they add force to a statement, such as all, and Allahs, etc., depending on what the person wants to say, right? So the exclamation mark becomes, as you know, a much necessary element as we separate them from the rest of the sentence and make sure the person who reads what is written knows that these are two different levels of communication. We're talking here about interjections, essentially, and also the expletives also. So they're communicating aside with language, an emotional reaction, essentially. We see here a long list of them. And when a person is translating or dealing with maybe, I don't know, probably subtitling or dealing with rewriting something, this emotional component of communication cannot be played down. It needs to be a part of it because the message must be rendered as completely as possible in the counterpart language. So you see here, some words are troublesome, such as caramba, for example, because it's a difficult one to translate. Now, in the sources I was looking into, I did not find a word, so there are other words or more emotional interjections that communicate what this word means, right? Okay. So you have vaya and so forth, come and so forth. I don't know if you have any comment concerning this. Has this ever been something of your concern? Probably not, because the reality is that when we translate, we tend to overlook or play down or disregard. But since translation should be accurate, it's important to add this emotional layer of communication to the messages that we are translating. Right? So, well, enough with that concerning interjections and expletives. Now, concerning euphemisms, now this is a little bit more sophisticated, right? I think this is also commonplace knowledge, so I'm not going to be being very long about euphemisms. Euphemisms are forms that are used to soften meaning, right? We're trying to mean something or say something, but we use it with a very polite expression that communicates an idea, right? So that's the idea. Essentially, is to handle this politeness element that is necessary for out of respect to the two parties which are communicating, see each other eye to eye and respect each other. And euphemism is criticism that is disguised, in language. That's what it is, really. So it's softer, agreeable terms using place of words which could be offensive, right? Or repelling, taboo topics. So why does this kick in communication? They come in as part of not telling someone anything, for example, about their body odors, which could be a touchy topic, or maybe about their appearance, right? Or about some maybe I don't know, the way they carry themselves, or maybe their appearance. Okay, that could be a topic. So since humans are idiosyncratic, because we all have like a very personal way of going about our own business, well, if you don't adhere to the norm or you are outside normal rules, of course you will get some probably some negative feedback. Well, that negative feedback is disguised or is shaded in language, and then people are told or communicated or mentioned indirectly something that could be wrong about them or something else or some situation. They're using in written and spoken speech to cover delicate matters, like probably a vulgarity that comes in as part of communication, some unpleasant truth or an indecency. Okay, now this, as I said, it's very idiosyncratic. What could be an indecency for some people, it is not for others. Okay, but we have standards, and we know that respect is necessary for good communication. So here we, read a little more now at the folk level. That's an everyday, everyday traditional communication. Euphemisms could be used to avoid bad luck or prevent a superstition from coming true. So this is like another layer of this. A word, it's like I knock on wood, right? Toco madera. This exists both in English and Spanish, right? And it's also a superstition. It's also a superstition that you need to walk on wood to keep a curse away, right? That's just to bring in an example of an euphemism. So it's like I wouldn't do that. It's like what you mean. I wouldn't dare that much. So I knock on wood, or God forbid that we face X situation, or I wouldn't do it that way. Toco madera, All right. At the upper socioeconomic levels, they're employed to avoid seeming crude or vulgar. They're hypocritical to some extent, those euphemistic expressions or phrases, because you're telling people something, but not to their face, right? Not to their face. So it's like in the presence of something that is not very nice, you'd say something like, that was perfect. That was perfect. But what you mean is the opposite, right? So that was a terrible thing to occur, or it's very unfortunate what you said. And then you, instead of telling them that shame on you or whatever, so that was perfect. That was perfect. You know, you just hit a home run. You just hit a home run, La botaste in Spanish. That la botaste del estadio. That's what it means. He just hit a home run over there. great. And then it's terrible, you know. What happened is really terrible. So this is how euphemism works. And then it is a good thing for us to familiarize ourselves with these forms of controversial forms, because what you're dealing here with hypocrisy, and when there is hypocrisy, what you're also communicating is, as we all know, is a falsehood. You're not telling people the truth, or there is irony in communication, right? Irony, ironía. Okay, you're not telling them what they need to know, but you're implying it with your words. Okay, so they could be created different ways. You change some words, you replace them using foreign words, and it's an antecedent to modulation in translation also, because this is what we do with modulation as a strategy, discussed by J.C. Catford, important translation theorist, is that you have to preserve meaning to the best of your ability, but you do it by altering the original to some extent. Euphemisms pretty much work the same way as a modulation strategy. You mean what you mean, but you don't mean it directly necessarily. Yeah, you resort to some other element that could be, as I said before, irony, that could be humor, that could be different things. An important resource that I think it's freely available out there is Charles Kang's Dictionary of Spanish American Euphemisms. Contains different categories, such as in the case of superstitions and words for the devil, names of animals, diseases, the evil eye, physical defects, death, and killing. Okay, it's a category in itself, as I was telling you. Knock on wood. I knock on wood. Where do you think that comes from? That superstition, right? I don't know, maybe you could think of some other superstition originated type of euphemism. I don't know, probably you could tell me one that you know that comes to your mind.
You can say, when you say God forbid, I think you mentioned that one. And then knock on wood, those are the ones that come to mind.
Okay, I will think that mm, having bad luck is a phrase used or a euphemism, as you mentioned, which I could translate or think or perceive is do not call in negativity. And that has to do with evil thoughts, thinking, and beliefs on the wrong side or the negative side. That's my perception of it.
There are quite a few of them. And the idea behind this initiative of paying attention to this specific field is that there are resources that can assist us in finding lists of all of these things. Now, they're all scattered all over the internet, but it's a good thing to have some resource. I think this dictionary is available for free, if I'm not wrong. I've seen it, but I have not downloaded or ever cared much about it, but it's useful. Delicacy, as you see here, is another field. It's another subfield of euphemisms, because it's you have to be careful on how you talk to people. You don't want to offend them. You don't want to hurt their feelings, So when you refer to the ages, occupations, and appearances, and so forth, now talking, about the shaming, it's a new field, because in the past it wasn't offensive to tell someone gordito, gordita, that wasn't, chubby or leggy, that wasn't that bad. But nowadays it's serious because of body shaming. So you shouldn't be referring to anybody's physical attributes or their appearance, because that's negative. Other categories of euphemisms involve mental moral defects. You see here quite a few of them that are controversial and ironic. Financial status. This is another field that I think people didn't offend much about in the past, but now it is a serious offense to tell someone like that they have no money, or that they can pay for things but they don't, and so forth. That could be offensive. There are also offenses and consequences connected to illegal behavior, the decency of the body, and the decency of love. All right, all these is part of it. Some of the topics are controversial because they're sexual in nature. Now, one set of euphemisms with parallels in English and Spanish are words generated as expletives based on excretion. Okay, and then you see here that this accounts for Spanish and English expletives beginning with the word "ca." I'm not going to say that. While English, for the same reason, has numerous of those expletives beginning with a "sh," that I'm not going to say the word. These words have different force, can be graded along a scale from the crude to the mild. Sorry. Here we have another important category. Okay, sex and private body parts are numerous, and they will vary all across. Now, fruits, vegetables, and other objects that might conceivably bear resemblance to a sex organ are used as euphemisms. Sorry about that. And this takes us to intersemiotic translation as is proposed by Roman Jacobson. Because you see in WhatsApp that lots of different images are used, and these are essentially memes, right? Memes that communicate some explicit content, but in a very kind of disguised way, A lot of them come from these levels of communication. Sorry. So words that are acceptable in one country may be insulting and vulgar in another, and this is part of the awareness necessary from a translator. In translating interjections and expletives, the important point is to achieve the same equivalent impact. Because of the shades of meaning and regional differences involved, translator must be careful in dealing with the words. You must always try to connect with some native speaker who could clarify meaning and tell a person if something is decent enough to be meant. I found a book called Dangerous English. I don't know if you've ever seen it. I don't know. It's online. I ran into it. I'm going to go into one of my memory banks that I have, here at home, and see if I might download it and upload it over there in Classroom. Let me see if I could find it. It's called Dangerous English. I don't remember exactly what the title is, but it's all about this different euphemism phenomenon related type of expressions. And its cover, it has like a fire, some flames. and it's like 2,000 dangerous words or something like that, dangerous English. And there you have a lot of guidance on how to go about and carry yourselves in terms of communicating, not to offend anybody or unintendedly, because generally these misunderstandings occur without saying it. Now I'm going to deal with some very concrete cases. I hope you have some understanding that it's necessary for me to go over some examples. Okay. Regionalisms. Now, for example, in Argentina, the verb coger, which is perfectly acceptable in Spain, much of Latin America, has sexual connotations and must be avoided usually. It's used by unsuspecting translators or foreigners. It creates uncomfortable situations, right? Laughter and embarrassing situations. Same thing happened with the word calentura, right? That means fever, sexual excitement. Predictably different results are used carelessly. If used carelessly, that could mean something else. It's sexual in nature. Now, constipado in Mexico, for example, to be congested and having a cold, whereas in South America, the person is cannot poop, really, cannot go to the restroom or congested in the bowels, right? Now, I would leave here this link in case you ever care about looking into some interesting resource that that you would like to explore and go beyond what we know as euphemisms. If you don't go beyond, please aprende inglés ila.com. It's a very good portal. The person who owns it is female, it's a woman, it's the one behind it, and you'll discover lots of information. Now, if I happen to find in my Toshiba data bank, and one that I have at home, the book that I was telling you about, I'm going to be posting it also in Classroom, just in case you decide it's interesting for you to deal with this information. This is very cultural, very cultural. Okay. Now, okay, we're going to go into cognates, some cognates. Okay, some cognates. Now, why do we keep coming back to cognates? It's so necessary at this point, and it will remain so. Later on, I'm going to talk to you about dictionaries and bilingual dictionaries. So bilingual dictionaries, they're just useless, essentially. They're just for reference, and they will not translate for us. The reason why they have become so useless is because of this phenomenon with cognates. You can go for a one-on-one correspondence between words. It's so difficult because of the different layers, meaning or different possible meanings encapsulated in a single term. So since there's so many levels of register and meanings appointed or ascribed to a word, the dictionary is not helpful. We need to relate to them on experience. And I don't know if you remember last week, but I showed you an image that I think is worth 1,000 words, in which translators learn from theory very little, from practice a little more, but most of the learning curve occurs out of mistakes. So this is why we bring in cognates, because they're based on people's mistakes. For example, criatura, it's not creature in the animal sense. It's more like a baby or infant. Okay. This is the right possible word to be used. So we shouldn't be referring to criatura as a creature. It's more like a baby or infant or infant animal, or I don't know, say the kid, the pup, the kitten, Yeah, or try to refer to a concrete specific species, baby, but it's more of a baby, not creature in the animal sense. Another partial false cognate, more of a partial one, is correspondiente, not as a newspaper correspondent or someone who subscribed to newspaper services and has a contract with a newspaper company, maybe. Okay. Or if we have someone who is now not rating events in the theater of actions, such as it's going on in the world in Middle East right now, it's more like a corresponsal. That's the proper term to be used, not correspondiente. That'll be a mistranslation altogether. It's more in the sense of parallel than anything. So criollo, it's a false cognate altogether. Not to mean Creole, as for example, from forms of Louisiana. So if we translate, he spoke Creole, we cannot say hablaba criollo, because that's not what it means, right? More of its meaning relates to Spanish descent, but born in Latin America, maybe local, and using criollo to refer to Creole as it's spoken maybe in the Caribbean, that'll be a major mistake, mistranslation also. Cuestión, that's another difficult word. It's a matter, right? Question or a theme of subject, that's a state of the matter or the matter itself, but not as in question, like an interrogative. Instead of that, it's la pregunta, okay, the question. Some of the difficult words that come to us based on translation experiences. That's where most of the wealth of translation knowledge comes from. Curso, so a series of events, not in the course of study at a university. Okay, instead of that, the proper term should be asignatura, not even materia, but more like asignatura. Okay, that's the proper definition for the word. Okay. This is one that gives trouble all the time in the university. We use that word because it's common in Spanish, but then it's not as specific as asignatura, okay? But, you know, it's a troublesome one. That's why it's a partial false cognate, because the meaning is communicated, but it's not precise. It's not precise, it's vague. So that's why it's a partial false cognate when you use it, you know, to mean or as an equivalent for asignatura, materia de curso, materia de estudio, subject matter. So more of events. Another good one is a false cognate, altogether cynical, right? Not as in skeptic or negative, instead of skeptical. Okay. Okay, also shameless, irresponsible, right? Deception is a false cognate all the time, all the way. Not in the sense of lying or hiding. It says engaño is a better word to go for. Also, decepción is more like disappointment. Sufrió una decepción cuando perdió. That's much better. Demandar, we have another case here. To sue in a court of law, that's a partial false cognate. So it's generally demand, okay, of strongly requesting something. No, better to mean, you know, going in a legal course of action. Demandar. Okay, I don't know if you are taking note of the words, but what I'm planning to do is to create a resource also that includes lots of these cognates for us to provide or render some levels of translation. So that'll be very useful because remember, learning from making mistakes is king. That's the best school of all, right? Making mistakes. Some people, they don't want to, but I think it's necessary to make mistakes in order to get better. That's the only way. In a field like translation, this is, I think, the way to be better or excellent. We also have numbers of proverbs, some new proverbs that I think are worth paying attention. We have the memoria, or by heart or memorized, the pura casualidad, by chance. So, de tal palo, tal astilla. I think this is an old one, cheap off the old block. Dejar a uno en la calle, to bleed you white, to rip off, right? That's make you go broke, right? It's like dejar a uno plantado, to stand someone up. It's like, not attending, or having someone not attending some date or maybe appointment, whatever. Del dicho al hecho hay mucho trecho. There is many slip tricks, the cup and the lip. I think this is the older version. They could be others, right? And I think we went over some of these before when we meant better said than done, among others that I think are a little more modern, right? Better said than done, easier to say, and so forth, that mean the same. Desde luego, of course. So, dicho y hecho, no sooner said than done. It's also along the same line with del dicho al hecho hay mucho trecho. It's also the same. Digno de confianza, okay, reliable. That's simply reliable. Okay. Now we're going to go back into history. And the reason why we're going to go into history is because, honestly, translation has a lot to do with the way we have come to learn the two languages. In this case, the English-Spanish pair, right? Spanish came to us as an inheritance. It's part of our culture. It's part of who we are. Even our names are in Spanish. So we inherited Spanish. And we live in a Spanish-speaking part of the world, right? Which is Central America. It's part of the Americas, okay? Former Spanish colony. However, English also have come, eventually came to us, but that came added. But there was a big history. There were sections of history that we did not pay much attention to because, well, as it seems, many countries, they keep their history separated, and we don't really pay much attention to where we come from or what happened before. It's important because Spanish existed, yes, but before Spanish, there were indigenous languages and cultures here. Of course, many of them were either, banned from mainstream society for different, reasons, which are social and economic, also racial, but also many of these groups, they just disappeared, right? They were exterminated. So we need to know what it was like when Spanish started here so that we understand what's going on with English nowadays. Because some people may think there isn't any linguistic imperialism with English. There is linguistic imperialism. There is. And it's, many of us are Eurocentric. We think everything coming from Europe is better, and that includes languages. And we need to start, finding ways to overcome all that and value culture, society, language that comes from other sections, other parts of the world, right? From our history in this case, above all. Okay. So, it's 9:13. could it be possible for me to go for a break a little earlier today? I'd like to ask the core our seminar organizers.
Good morning, everyone. Well, it's possible. What time would you like to have your break? I mean, the break?
Could it be possible now at 9:15?
Yeah, that's possible.
All
Mhm.
right, wonderful. So what I would like to do next is, before I get into this new topic, I would like us to go for a little break because this is a topic that I think deserves some of our attention here, and I want to make sure we will answer some questions concerning this topic. So let us take a brief break, and then we'll come back and go back a little bit into. So we already studied what happened in Mexico, right? Remember about Nahuatl, and we were talking also about um, how um, these events transpired, and we learned about Malinche and all of that, right? So now it's time to know what happened in Peru, which is another important civilization that was conquered by the Spaniards. So I don't know. I think we should take a brief break before we get started. So,
Okay,
mhm,
it is, well, let's say 9:15.
wonderful.
We're going to be back in 10 minutes.
That'll be wonderful. Very good. Thank you. How long will it take? We'll be back at
25.
9:25.
So
Okay.
10 minutes then.
So we'll be right back.
Be right back. Okay.
we are back. So here we are back. Good. Yes, as I was saying before, we have, so many different situations with languages that are necessary for us to study. Now, look, in the English department, as in other universities that I have seen, I'm talking internationally, courses in the history of the language are important. In the English department, most of the courses in the past of history of the language were focused on British English and the history of Indo-European languages and so forth. However, if you ask me, it would also be important to study the history of English and Spanish language relations with the rest of the world. In our case, in our history of America, it's an important topic. This is an important topic. So now that we just talked about what happened in Mexico, it's important for us to look at what happened in South America. In this case, in the Viceroyalty of Peru, which became a Viceroyalty in the long run. But Peru had to be conquered also, okay? And this story involves Panamanian. So, like the story of Mexico, the conquest of Peru involved translators and interpreters in important ways. So, although Francisco Pizarro, had never had the good fortune of encountering a single individual as compelling as Malinche or Marina, or Doña Marina. On an early voyage to the New World, Pizarro brought two young Indians, Martin and Felipillo, from Panama to Spain to be taught Spanish and converted to Christianity, okay? Both were involved in Pizarro's encounters with the Inca king Atahualpa. And history suggests that their incompetence or deliberate misinterpretation of Spanish or maybe indigenous languages caused problems. Okay, so here we go. So the most dramatic incident was the requerimiento led before Atahualpa, as you know, that required them to listen and acknowledge that they would be subjects of the Spanish Empire and that they needed to abide by the authority of the Catholic Church immediately. And they were immediately enslaved because that's the status granted to them. The priest in charge of explaining Christianity and the power of the Spanish king to Atahualpa was Padre Vicente de Valverde. Okay? As history paints him, he was an arrogant and inflexible Spaniard, right? Whether of poor interpretation or his own pride, Atahualpa, the king of the Incas in this case, rejected the requerimiento and threw the Bible away. Okay, threw the Bible away. He didn't accept it because he was a king. And Father Vicente handed him to the ground. Okay, handed him to the ground. So this provided the Spaniards with the excuse that they sought to seize him and demand ransom for his release and begin the conquest of the Inca Empire. So, long story short, his interrogation was handled through the Indian interpreter Felipillo, a Panamanian Indian from Panama, of course, who managed to mislead and confuse both the Spaniards and Atahualpa with his poor interpretation. So he turned things even more complex than they were originally supposed to be. So one explanation for the situation that occurred in this historical event was that Felipillo had very poor knowledge of Atahualpa's Quechua. That was not Felipillo's native language because he was a native from another region. As you know, Panama is away from, it was away from the Inca Empire, right? And also Spanish. So a more sinister explanation is that he belonged to one of the subordinate tribes that hated the Incas. And furthermore, that he had fallen in love with one of Atahualpa's concubines and feared for his life if Atahualpa should remain in power. So there is also this other theory about what could have all transpired really with Felipillo. So Atahualpa was executed by the Spanish, and Felipillo was also hung. He was hanged, I think, yeah, because he turned, yeah, he was hanged, yeah, because he became a traitor. He turned against Pizarro, and he went on in favor of Diego de Almagro, but they were all hanged. So this is the story. This is the story. What matters here is that incompetence in interpretation or translation can lead to a war very easily, or as a way to justify problems, you know, different kinds of problems. So happier symbols of translators and interpreters in the conquest of the Inca Empire of Peru, which something else, the case of the Inca Garcilaso, much admired figure, right? 1539, 1616. This character, Garcilaso de la Vega, this man, turned out to be an excellent example of a competent interpreter, a competent translator, compared to what happened to Felipillo. Okay, Felipillo was hanged because of his incompetence or because of his ill intention against the Inca ruler, against Atahualpa. So the situation here with him was very sad, rather sad, but we all know that misinterpretation, mistranslation creates problems. Now, the Inca Garcilaso, a historical figure, was the counterpart, the other side of the story, you know. So he symbolically carried in his veins the blood of Spanish conquerors and Inca royalty. This one was one of the few fortunate ones to receive an education from Spaniards, as well as both also the oral tradition of his Inca ancestors on his mother's side. So as a result, he was a bridge person between the two cultures, an in-betweener in this case of Spanish and one of the lingua francas of the Americas of the day among the indigenous populations, which was Quechua. Well qualified to interpret each side to the other, both from the cultural and linguistic aspects, okay? Now that we were talking before about euphemisms and the existence of these different layers of meaning concerning semantics and pragmatics and so forth, he was a fortunate person because he understood the language nuances and he could help people communicate better, right? So El Inca Garcilaso de la Vega had been given credit for persuading his Inca countrymen to accept the conquest as something inevitable and attempting to smooth some of the harsher aspects of the conquest imposed by Spanish cousins. In this case, he referred to them as cousins, so he was also like some in-betweener and assisted in the process of conquering the empire. Okay. So why do we bring this up, or why is this relevant to this topic on translation and interpretation? The topic is extremely relevant because it's through interpreters and through translators that conquest, advances, or I don't know, even penetration occurs of a cultural nature. So this is the way it works. Now we do the same, with some more sophisticated means, as you know, the media, essentially the role of the media is that of a cultural penetration. And we know we cannot escape this reality because media is controlled by corporations that have owners. And these owners belong to the right wing of society. And some of this wing is social, but most of it is pretty fascist. And there is no escaping from this bombardment of messages in favor of their very own agenda. And well, the same thing happened before. They gained some interlocutors, such as El India Garcilaso de la Vega, and educated this person and prepared him in order to sell the conquest to the Incas, who did not accept the authority of the Spanish people. So it's important to establish this here. So he was also first American-born writer who earned a well-deserved reputation in Spain as well as his native Peru. Why do I bring this up? Because in the case of Doña Marina or Malinche that we were talking about during last week, she did not have a very good reputation among the Spaniards, to the point that she's associated with distrust and dishonesty and treason also, because we know that she did not always tell the truth as it seemed, or she facilitated to her fellow indigenous people. She facilitated the conquest of Mexico, and she betrayed the Aztecs. That's what she did. Well, in the case of this other historical character, Garcilaso de la Vega got a positive image both among the Incas and also from the Spaniards. He went to Spain at an early age. He learned from humanism and the Renaissance. We don't know if he went to a university. We assume he went to a university maybe in Spain. He began for the time he lived, that was just like something extraordinary. He began his career by translating into Spanish the Diálogo de Amore by León Hebreo, and then as a member of the expedition. He wrote an account of Hernando de Soto's adventures in Florida. And in history, it is recorded that his masterpiece was Comentarios Reales de los Incas, in which he chronicles the best of the civilization that was destroyed by the Spaniards. So he writes as an interpreter in the broad sense of the word, okay? He explains the ways of the Incas, of his mother's lineage, to the Spaniards of his fathers, He worked the work of a linguist delight, okay? He sprinkles it with Quechua and explains this to Castilian audiences. Okay? He includes also poetry in trilingual versions. There's a brief example that includes the Quechua original, classical Latin, and the Castilian of the Golden Age. So he turned to be a scholar in the long run, and also a record keeper of cultural information from his people before his civilization was destroyed, as it seems. So this is pretty much the kind of work that he produced, and this is an extract of Comentarios de los Incas that I just mentioned before, in which he provided information from Quechua, then into Latin, and also into Castilian Spanish of his time. So this gives us an idea of what a qualified or better qualified interpreter or translator does. is a person who keeps a record of the information he gathers, and he facilitates it among the different people. It's a real in-betweener and doesn't take a side. If you pick a side, as it was the case of Felipillo, then the consequences will eventually catch up with the person, right? And especially if there is a war at play or something very serious like an offensive or whatever. So why do I refer to this? Well, I refer to this because this is the same thing that happened, for instance, very recently when we had another instances of Western civilization going into the Middle East, for example, during NATO operations, not militarily all the time, but sometimes civilian and so forth, in the Middle East, in places like Afghanistan and places like Iraq, as it happened some 20 years ago, maybe 20, 25 years ago. And all of these troops from Western countries did not speak Arabic. So what they used for communication was also interpreters. So you watch news and you watch movies and you read articles and read books, and you'll discover that most of these campaigns were dealt in the same way as it was during the conquest in America. So it's just like the Spaniards prepared some interpreters to, inform these other cultures about what their intentions and goals were. Well, that's the same thing that happened, or that is still happening. So eventually, just to give an example that relates to present day events, if this war moves further into some military campaign, foot campaign, or on foot, what do you think is going to happen? I don't think any American troops are going to be prepared to speak Dari or Farsi, which are the languages spoken, or also Arabic in areas in Iran, Farsi, Dari, and Arabic. So what they're going to need is, again, interpreters as they did in Afghanistan and Iraq before. And it's going to be very challenging because of the language barrier. I think it's not that the wars are lost. It's not that the objectives are not clear. The problem is that people cannot communicate on the ground. That's the real problem. If people cannot communicate on the ground, then victory is going to remain elusive. It's going to remain elusive because what is required is for people to agree on something. So once more, I have to bring in this political element of interpretation and translation. But we cannot escape it, because we know this is an activity that has always required, has always been required for the understanding of countries and nations. Okay, very good. So this takes us to some of the things similar to what El Inca Garcilaso de la Vega created, which is comparing languages. Okay, the existence of these parallel structures that compares 2 or 3 languages. In this case, he was proficient in Latin and Castilian Spanish. So he created this. This is the beginning of the databases of information, the glossaries, the dictionaries, and the resources that we at present use in order to communicate ourselves in other languages. So this is an important piece of work. Unfortunately, I need to, keep on telling you this. We don't have any initiative in this regard. People in universities and the government, they never talk to you about it. The last time something was mentioned concerning translators or translation was a new translation law, but the translation law didn't say anything new. It's all the same, again, more of the same. There aren't any new ideas behind it, because I think people don't understand the importance of translation in our context, or our politicians don't understand it yet. They just don't get it, and they don't know how important that is. And we keep on, tripping over the same thing and making mistakes. And foreign policy in Panama is a disaster because there isn't any organization. Look, just to give you an example. Okay. We have a School of Foreign Relations in the Faculty of Administración Pública, Public Administration Faculty. Do you think these scholars in this field speak English? What do you think? Do you think they speak English? Or do you think it is required for them to at least speak English or some other language? Do you think that is required?
As far as I know, I don't think it's a requirement because I met a young man at the university in one of my classes, and he said that we were all in one of the French classes, and he said that he was gonna stop learning French. He was gonna to take a break because he was trying to learn English also, and learning both was not something that he thought he could do. So learning English was more important for him, and I think it was because he did not speak the language. I mean, that's what I can say, which I was a bit surprised, but I guess it's not necessary for the program.
Yes, and there is a lot of mistrust in the university. For example, I have discovered now that I am tenured professor because I'm titular right now, is that there is mistrust in the university. They feel, many of the scholars in the university feel like being an English teacher is just being like a translator, that you cannot propose or you don't have the ability or the capacity to think and produce work of academic quality. And they don't see how important that is. And they even dare to hold a school of foreign relations without having a school of languages inside that faculty. The first thing, if I were the president of the university, I would demand from them is to establish a school of languages inside that faculty. Otherwise, you close your faculty because you're not doing anything over there, really. It's a lot of political thinking, but zero competence. And this is very, very dangerous. This criticism is not coming from outside, but this is a problem that we see from the inside. A good schools of foreign relations that prepare some diplomats at different levels need people who are competent, in at least 2 or 3 languages. And this is a serious disadvantage that they are running the risk of closing their own faculty or their own schools. And that's not good. It's like they allow people to learn if they want to, or if they feel like, because they feel it's like you're suspicious if you speak 2 languages or 3 languages, you are not trustworthy or whatever. So that cannot be anymore the case. We need people who are competent and who are also qualified, academically qualified, but also competent with languages. Otherwise, we're not progressing. Then they don't want to be replaced or ignored or set aside for other people who studied in other countries. Of course, these people lack the political, component or this national pride that is required for diplomats to uphold. They just have the linguistic competence, but that's also a failure because you need a person who has both components, someone who's going to defend the country and who's also capable of doing it in at least 2 languages or at least 1 language that's of their command. So translation should go in that direction. Probably that could be the beginning of a translation school. Yeah, someone want to say something. Go ahead. I think someone wanted to say something. I don't know.
I also like to say something regarding that school or that faculty, international relations. That, well, before, I remember before they had English courses in every level, every semester, and today they have reduced that to I mean, general English, because that's obligatory, and I think that maybe 1 or 2 courses, but that is in the first year. So after that, they don't have a language. They don't study the language. So imagine the product of this career. They don't really, they don't speak English. It's so sad. Everything has been reduced in terms of this important language. It's not that, I mean, if you want to see it as, oh, this is a language that gives you status. No, it's because it's important, especially in this career, international relations. And right now it's even more important due to the problems we are facing with it, with USA and the canal and the control of it. And so it's even more important. But I don't understand why they don't see it. I mean, the authorities there, they don't see it so important for the students to really practice in every semester, even more than one subject. It's important for them to, at the end, to graduate knowing this important or international language.
Yeah, we have many problems in translation. Let me tell you something. For example, here at the University of Universidad de Panama, we have a case. You know, the Ministry of Education is the one in charge of certifying people to become translators. You have to do it through them. Okay, the procedure is you obtain a power of attorney, and then your attorney is going to take that request for you to become a certified translator through the Ministry of Education. Then they'll have a database of testers. Then whoever is an aspiring translator to be certified or licensed, they need to hire the 2 testers. Then the testers will submit a report to the Ministry of Education stating your level of competence. And once you go through that, then you go to Foreign Relations Ministry and you do the registration of your signature over there, and then you're good to go with seal and everything. The situation is that we cannot do that at the university because it's something that Meduca controls. Now I wonder, why would Meduca get their hands in translation? A ministry that has so many problems that they cannot fix their own problems. Okay, they want to control something important like translation. Now I wonder what the problem is. So this is something that I think should be discussed, and it's dangerous because they're controlling something that is required for the country to do better. That should probably be controlled by some institution, something larger than Meduca. And Meduca is not that academic either. Let me tell you the truth, because if you look at the people who work there, they keep firing everybody every 4 years. So I don't think they really have like all this technical personnel that has the expertise, not in languages, probably curriculum. That's what they know. They don't know anything else. So the fact that you know something about curriculum doesn't mean that you're good at languages or that you know how to go about translating things. So this is serious. In our country, we have some serious situations that I think that's why we need a new constitution. And that's something that should be rewritten in the Constitution so as to avoid the kidnapping of some, or you know, it's like they have placed ransom, or they're asking for ransom for the recovery of some areas. Translation has been sequestered by the politicians. That's the reality of the problem here. So this role of the in-betweeners, cultures, is very important. So this Inca Garcilaso de la Vega played an important role in how these Spaniards went on and controlled Peru and turned it into what it was eventually. The same with Mexico, right? And the Aztecs. So, okay. Now, all of this knowledge created based on the analysis of languages and comparing it has brought us to this field, the subfield of linguistics called comparative linguistics of Spanish and English. So the most useful subfield of linguistics is this, okay? This one looks at the lexicon, which is what we have in our heads, right? Concerning communication and how communication occurs, phonetic grammar and stylistics of two or more languages on a comparative basis. Now, comparative linguistics studies ways in which two languages are similar and different. And in the case of differences, it may suggest closest equivalent structures, words, solutions. The value of this approach is obvious because the analysis will tell a translator what is appropriate or not. Now, the book that I have uploaded, I hope you have checked it out, by Vasquez Ayora. It's an important one in that regard. It's one of the best. We will be focusing on the first unit of that book, I think by Wednesday, around Wednesday. We're going to be doing that so that we get the opportunity to segment some pieces of translation. Segmentation in translation is very important because this is the meaning unit. This is what we use in order to analyze how the translation theory transpired or turned into a translation process. How that theoretical element turned into something practical. That's it's like more like putting it on the ground. So then I think this is excellent training for translation work. This is the type of reading that you need to do. I selected the very best of the books I knew for this purpose because translation research is not easy. It's not easy. But if we focus on English and Spanish, Spanish-English pairs, then we will be able to produce something of a better quality. So it's worth looking at the book. So I strongly recommend you to download that book and keep it because I'm sure if you get curious, you will discover very interesting things over there, you know, very interesting. I strongly recommend it very much. As a matter of fact, I'm right now going to be talking to you about Unit 1. So for, you know, as a way for you to know what it is that we are talking about. So let me just bear with me a second here. I am going to be checking that book right now. Vasquez Ayora, Gerardo Vasquez Ayora. Okay, as I communicated in classroom, the book is not a new one, okay? You need to think that, oh, it's an old book. So no, languages are the same. They're all the same. So things don't change that much in languages. What happens is that people probably find simplified versions to analyze things, but the information, you know, won't change very much. Let me just go back to sharing. Okay, let me see if this is. Yeah, I hope this is sharing. Let me zoom it up a bit. Okay. Okay, here we go. So, what will you find in this book? What you will find in Unit 1, I'm going to go straight to that, is that they do an analysis of what they call the meaning unit, okay? Traditionally, the meaning unit has been the word or sentence, but this is not always the case. You have the word, of course, but then you have other elements such as how they relate among one another. That's the functional unit, semantic unit that provides some meaning, dialectical unit that has to do with the way people shape language for communication, prosodic that are connected to intonation, accent, or the musicality of the language. And also you can see it on how they connect with other words and simplified units, fraction, and so forth, that they all belong to different linguistic phenomenon of breaking down in graphemes that correspond to morphemes also, and these kind of things. And even variability that has to do with the unification of groups. Remember that there is always this element of economy in linguistics, which you try to say more with less, and also affinity groupings. Then point 1.2 in this very same unit at around page 16, we're going to be talking about segmenting a text and forms of segmenting text. And then we're going to start tapping into some very technical areas of linguistics, such as lexicology. So how we should proceed in terms of breaking down words or phraseology, in larger segments, right? And then transference and verification. And here we will tap into a back translation. And you read here in 1.3, you do transference and verifying. Verifying what? Verifying correspondence and meaning, essentially. Selecting the correspondences, what's the criteria that Academy recommends for selecting what is meaningful, what is not, and then doing reverse translation. A reverse translation, which is, as you know, retranslating back to the original language in order to compare the very first version with the original and see if meaning was preserved, what was lost in translation. And then the margin, of course, which are the notes necessary for you to refer to the process of translating a document. Now, for some people who are practical and think that translation is a way of making money, it probably doesn't make much sense for a person to take notes and create a report or take some side notes or footnotes or endnotes to a translation process. However, if you're doing research, this is extremely useful and educational, because this is that could be a way for you to propose how you should deal with specialized translation, technical translation of some sort, or technical text, or maybe some historical document, who knows. So we don't have that many books from Panamanian authors. I think, as a matter of fact, there could probably be one or two, not that many authors who will produce something in this regard. And then we have some other topics, which is exactly what we're talking about right now, which is linguistics applied to translation, because the topic is highly relevant. Everything aligns in the same curriculum and the same deployment of contents. So you have all of this phenomenon occurring when linguistics is analyzed or extracted from the translation process. That has to do with the vision of the world, the culture, arbitrarity, the signified and the signifier, and so forth, and some new trends, of course, at the time, And here, for example, I would say it's extremely important for us to go into stylistics, okay, la estilística, because this topic remains pretty obscure, okay. Very few people would focus. One of the few is a Spaniard author who has a very good Mayoral Asensio. I don't know if you've read some of his books. Mayoral Asensio, does it ring a bell to you? Does it ring a bell to any of you? Mayoral Asensio.
Not to me.
No. Well, many of his books are out there for free, let me tell you. And these are really, really good books. So Mayoral Asensio, let me see very quickly here if I could tell you a little bit more on him. He has some very, very good papers and excellent books also to educate translators. And this is one of the areas out of which I think Roberto Mayoral Ascension, exactly. He's a scholar from Universidad de Granada in Spain. Yeah. Exactly. Translating books. Yeah, he's a professor at Universidad de Granada, University of Granada, exactly. So he has very good books really out there, and he's been generous enough to share them for free. And many of his books are focused on the translation of legal documents and commercial, historical, and so forth. And he has provided insights on some areas which deserve attention here. So many people say that passive voice is not good in Spanish and so forth. Well, and he explains the reasons why writing in using passive voice to replace active voice from English is not a good idea. And then he also taps into this other topic on Anglicisms. This is also part of the curriculum that we're going to be developing in this certificate program. I want you to go into this chapter, Anglicismo de frecuencia, okay? Because this is the phenomenon of finding something untranslatable, and then you will resort to a borrowing of a term and use it. And here, the reasons are explained. And it's a good thing for us to get familiarized with the technical terms such as syntagma or syntagmatical. That's concerning how something is said connected to what was meant originally. It's not always very clear, but there are very good relations between languages and meaning that could cause a person to fall into the trap of using that. For example, here you have some other things such as, for example, let's see if maybe not discourse. Some very interesting procedures for the execution or deployment of translation. This is very good. And this is presented from different schools of thought. You see here, Escuela Norteamericana, Escuela Franco-Canadiense, okay? And what is meant by literal and what they call the traducción oblicua here. Okay, it's very good to look at the analysis and the connection. The treatment of these technical topics is extensive, and it gets into J.C. Catford's phenomenon that we're going to start talking about. Such as strategies for translation, transposition, and modulation in a very didactic way. The phenomenon of equivalence and adaptation, amplification, which, look, this is not treated in detail in other books. They will not explain that to you or justify the reason why these strategies exist, such as explicit amplifying and explaining, explicitation, they put it that way, compensation also, and some more on the general procedure and translation here. So there is a lot here that deserves our attention here. So, and even you may resort to pages like 436, in which you have a thematic index in case you are looking for something specific and you need an answer, a quick answer to that problem. So the book is nearly 400 pages, a bit short of 100, and explains everything that you need to know about technical aspects of translation, from a very academic perspective. The reading is not so high. What I mean is not extremely technical that you have to be like a PhD in hold a PhD in linguistics to understand this. No, and it's in Spanish on top of all of this. So that's why I think this is going to become a very, very good source of information for us. Now, if you could, as soon as you start writing your reaction paper, you should start reading this very first chapter that ends here on page 23. It's the first 23 pages of this material, because we're going to be discussing this on Wednesday. The name of the chapter is, let me see, Procedimientos Técnicos de Análisis, okay? Technical procedures, analysis technical procedures. So, or translation analysis technical procedures for preliminary analysis of text, right? This is so good because some people, when they are requested to translate, they just don't know what to do or what to do first, second, third. Well, here they tell you what is a good way of proceeding, right? Up to page 23. Those 23 pages, I think, are critical for us to walk away from this Diplomado with a very clear idea. As I was telling you, this book, for example, the original was 1977 or 78, but now they need to reprint it and republish it in 2005, because look, you don't have books this good out there in the market anymore that explain all this, like from this scholarly perspective. So you will find in classroom this evening, because since you'll be writing your paper for tomorrow, this evening I'm going to start giving or providing some guidelines on what is going to happen with this. Not that I'm giving you any date for any work, but at least discussing some elements of the very first chapter from this book from Vázquez Ayora, Introducción a la Traductología, Curso Básico de Traducción. So I think this is important information for us to bear in mind. I don't know does it ring a bell to you, Vázquez Ayora? Have you seen any of his work before?
No.
Okay. Okay, here we go. Here we go. Okay, so going back to comparative linguistics, it's an important subfield of linguistics. This is the one that I think can help us. I found this image here in internet that I think illustrates the position of comparative linguistics compared to the traditional branches of linguistics. So you see it's a number 7. Why is it a number 7? Why? Because it's specialized. It's very technical. And then this breaks down into the languages that are the subjects of study, right? So it won't be the same to do comparative linguistics between English and Polish, for example, or German and Czech language, maybe. So in our case, it'll be comparative linguistics of Spanish and English. So it's a subfield. It is a subfield because it focuses on concrete languages and specific areas. Then How will we learn what we need to know from comparative linguistics? Guys, we need to read, okay? We need to read on the topic, okay? It's important. But then what to read, really? Well, Vasquez Ayora's book fills this gap, okay? Probably you have some, you know, curiosity on the topic. Maybe you're curious, you want to know more. There you have all the technical explanation. The technical explanation between the two languages, comparing the two languages. He does it using Spanish, but I think this analysis from Spanish brings in, or he uses many examples in in English too. So it's very good for this reason. Very, very good, because you're gonna have English over there. So what is important to know concerning comparative linguistics? Okay, in this slide, we have a very important piece of information that we need to consider. So English is concrete, direct, and descriptive, okay, with a fixed word order. Okay, everybody knows English is based on this, like subject, verb, object, structure, and you are going to have some syntactic movements, but it pretty much respects this structure all the time. The style of the language is influenced largely by this element of word order, and the writing conventions also follow along a very direct procedure. It's good for science and technical information and business, as most of the information is like really focused on being direct. Okay, you won't be flourishing or bringing in other things. No. On the other hand, Spanish is abstract, affective, and indirect. Okay, and a lot of flexibility is allowed, mainly in word order, more suitable for poetry, love, elegant, dramatic discourse. Okay, so that is why we find some genres are not very popular in Spanish. For example, if you want to read something technical, chances are you're going to find your literature in English. And the behind stage reason for this is simply because English is, for technical topics. Whereas you're going to find literature books, very good literature books in Spanish. It's because behind the stage reason is Spanish is good for that. It's good for elegant prose and for dramatic discourse, right? That's the way it goes. For example, at Universidad de Panama, we have some awards granted. I think last year there was and this is I think something that happens along with the Real Academia de la Lengua, that at the university they offer an award on a yearly basis. It has different categories. Last year, I think it was a journalist. I don't remember the name of the Panamanian journalist. Maybe you could recall, you could remind me. I don't know. I don't remember the name of the journalist, but I'm talking about well, it has different categories, and this is going to reappear this year again, that they're going to have a poster communicating that information. And they have different categories in poetry, short story, novel, etc., etc. And you will discover that most of the participants who go into this competition for submitting their novels, or they're all essentially writers of fiction writers. And we don't have categories on nonfiction. Sorry. I don't know if you could recall this important award. If there is anybody who remembers that, let me just maybe do a quick search here. Maybe I'll discover that one. Okay, it's been organized for a while. Concurso Octavio Méndez Pereira, I think that's the one I'm referring to. But they have different authors every year. Back in 23 was Pedro Rivera. Okay, so Pedro Rivera was a film director, poet, and storyteller, right? Okay, there are different categories. You see novel, cuento, that's story or short stories of poetry, theater, and essay, ensayo. So there have been all of these contests occurring every year, and every year many people participate, but we've never had a single English teacher here participate, or someone from someone who has books or has written books in English who could participate. That could be an interesting challenge for people or for academics or maybe scholars from our field to bring in some work that they could present for this event. I think the award last year was $10,000 for now it probably now catches your attention, but the award was $10,000 last year, $10,000. And I think there wasn't a winner, or something happened that there was a situation with the book that they were that they had in the 2 or 3 books that they had for this, and very few people participate. And this is good money, honestly. Okay. Now, this is going to bring me back now to this interesting book, okay? Introducción a la traductología. How will you translate traductología in English, please? What is the translation for traductología, please?
I don't know if it's correct, but I will use translation studies.
Translation studies, exactly. Translation studies, exactly. Translation studies. And what does that imply? What it implies is that this is not a single field, or it is not a clear field with very defined lines that you could tell, okay, this is where translation begins and this is where translation ends. No, it has impact, or it's been impacted by different other branches of linguistics and other studies, which are cultural studies and anthropology and so forth. So it's an important component of academic work. Okay, seeing translation this way. Why does this matter? It matters very much because let's say you write a book in Spanish, but you could translate your book to English, or you could write a book in English and translate it to Spanish. This is a great advantage. The problem with translators is that most of the translators are not full-time scholars devoted to producing books or material. We don't have that kind of professional here in our context. We probably do, but they don't see the potential they have, and they probably don't even care much about it because they consider there are others who could do better work than them. And well, I'm sorry, but I have to tell you that you're wrong if you think that way. You are the one who can do more because you know the two languages. And people, what do you think happens with most of these cuentistas and writers of novels and so forth, of these writers, novel writers? They don't know any English. And what they do is that many of them read translations of English novels also. And they have very good command of Spanish, of course, probably better than most of us, because this is what they mainly focused on. But they are not knowledgeable about other languages, so they just have like a very narrow vision of fiction. We don't have many fiction writers coming from an Anglo perspective who could produce very good quality books. Or, for example, let me give you an example. This is what happened to me. Last year, I went to Librería Universitaria, and I wanted to insert a book of mine that I wrote, a book on academic writing. It was difficult because of some constraints with the government and so forth and Contraloría. So it took a while. Now my book is in there. I was looking for other books in English because they put my book in a section where there were other books, of course, but I didn't find a single other book in English, or I didn't find a story in English or a book of stories in English. I didn't find anything like that. Now, if you write a very good book in about Panamanian folklore in English, you can sell that in hotels. You can sell that in travel agencies. You can take that. I don't know. Maybe you'll go to La Cinta Costera, or maybe you'll take your book somewhere and you will sell your books, man, because people, they don't know anything about Panama. And once you look, if you have traveled and you go to Tocumen Airport, that place is, deserted. You don't find anything. All they sell you over there is in these areas, but they're gonna sell you whiskey. They want to sell you cigars, and that's it. That's the kind of tourism we have in this country. We don't have anything scholarly. We don't have anything like that, and people are hungry for material on Panamanian folklore, but they want it in English, and we're not writing any of that in English, or nobody has written anything recently. Maybe there were some books, but there aren't any at present. And translators are, I think, the first line of literature producers who could write books of this nature, storybooks. Now, I've seen, for example, at la Feria del Libro, a couple of books written by Panamanian authors, but they're not as common. They're pretty scarce. And we don't have anything creative over there now. People have turned most of their creativity to the social networks. That's where you're going to find people's creativity in TikTok and Instagram and Facebook and so forth, maybe, but not in culture, folklore, because there is money to invest, of course. But if you believe in your skill, you could start, with something simple and eventually write something better. I didn't find a single storybook in English. Nothing about Panama in English. So this is a big gap that needs to be filled. And it's and now you don't need to depend or rely on any publishing house that wants to impose conditions on you, because there are that many that you can do whatever you want to do. Really, they will allow you to do whatever you want to do as long as you have an ISBN number. You are okay. That's all you need. That's all you need, and you can proceed and write. So those of you who have time in your hands, sit down and write something, please. Here in this certificate program, I brought this, I've labeled it top tier book on comparative linguistics, okay? Because there aren't that many books that are for free out there available on this topic, okay? We will little by little get into the different elements. The first chapter is on units of analysis and the segmentation, transference, verification of meaning using back translation. Okay, this very good chapter would play an important role in proposing some research project here during the Diplomado. Chapter 2 is on linguistics. The third one is on stylistics, and we have a fourth that I think would impact an important topic of ours on Hispanicism and Anglicism. And there are others which are very useful in this book. So I think, and I hope this has brought to your attention why there is a second book in classroom right now. This second book, of course, we're not doing anything with it at this point because we have some other work before. But pretty soon we're going to start talking about the contents of this book. Several chapters are useful. And I think very educational. And I think we will benefit a lot from reading this. So English has been described as moving comfortably in the plane of reality, okay? Spanish feels more is in the abstract plane of intellect or emotion. That is why probably you find that Garcia Marquez and Vargas Llosa and some of those writers, what they have produced is works of fiction, very, very good works of fiction, that through that fiction, they have been able to capture the reality of life in this part of the world. But it's more a language for not so much for technical communication or facts. It's more about the aesthetics of language and the elegance of the prose. And that is why this is the standard that has been used in Latin America and the Spanish-speaking world to label something as good or not good. So the more aesthetic your prose is, and as it seems, the elegance is the hallmark of quality. But it doesn't have to remain that way, you know. It doesn't have to remain that way because the only thing that we can guarantee is change. In the future, things will change, and in the past, things were this, labeled as successful, unsuccessful, based on this. But things are changing, always. The only guaranteed thing is change. Change is certainty. So probably we could start writing something else, something more in the lines of reality in Spanish. Why not? Or finding ways, like we have to find new ways. That's the reality. So English sees the world in descriptive terms, Spanish in affective ones. English presents series of snapshots of reality. Spanish is more concerned with how, sorry for the typo, that reality affects people. English has many word images and slang terms which efficiently summarize reality in its concrete. Spanish is more subjective, right? Examining the effect that nature and reality have on the observer. Okay? So this is insight coming from comparative linguistics. This is the only field that I think could provide this kind of information based on comparing how the languages function. So to keep on, thriving or discussing this same matter, okay, we have that English has 5 form-verb structures, where Spanish has an extraordinarily complex one of 46 different forms, with emphasis on subjunctive to express shades of meaning, emotion, and intention. Okay, that's one thing. English has a simple past tense, while Spanish plays with the differences between preterite and imperfect to indicate whether the action is specific and short-term or continuing. English has the simple verb be, whereas Spanish, ser estar, provides nuances of transitory states of emotion or permanent inherent characteristics. Further, translators must grapple with whether the simple English you should be rendered as the formal Spanish usted, or the more intimate tú, and so forth. So there are additional layers of formality or register or ways of addressing others. English has a tendency to use the passive voice much more than Spanish. Okay, this is important. And Spanish mostly relies on the use of se, right? Se hace, se dice, se explica. Although employment of a passive voice in Spanish is not wrong, excessive use will sound strange to a native speaker, who get the feeling rather quickly that the text it's a literal translation from English, right? Okay. So variety needs to go in. Adverbs are not commonly used in Spanish as in English, as they occur in English. So frequently, an adjectival or verb clause, more natural transition, some document, some phrase here goes in. Okay. Also, it's important to bear in mind that since Spanish is a more emotional and effective language than English, interjections, especially the ones concerning invocations of God, Dios mío, or por los clavos de Cristo, or something like that, must be toned down in English, to avoid an exaggerated sense of emotion. So if you translate por los clavos de Cristo, that'll be more like about Jesus or something like that, something that tones down a bit, because there's so many of these expressions that are brought in. So in business letters, customary effusive Spanish salutations and endings must also be reduced to shorter and less emotional English formulas. What you will be dealing with, Selig, in chapter 2 of the material that we posted on the translation of contexts, has an important role, my friends. I think here you will discover that everything boils down to communication in that regard. Let me just stop sharing for a second here. Yeah, I'm going to stop sharing here for a second and go into what we have, this material. Just bear with me a second. On creative translation. Yeah, I hope this is big enough. Now, as we go into chapter 2 from our book here by Remy Selig, the one on business and professional translation, I think we appointed you to read some material from here. Here, what you will run into is advertising that we were talking about, right? publicidad, stated one of our colleagues here in the certificate program, which is, I think, a possible translation or rendering for this term. However, we know that it's generally we say propaganda, but propaganda means something else. It's a partial false cognate probably, and maybe publicidad, we don't know, but it's a term that has to do with using English to communicate and promote, sell something. In the topic of business register, you will find a bunch of sayings that I would like you to go ahead and proceed and translate. This work you could probably send to my mail if you want to, because this is not in classroom necessarily, or we are not appointing you to do well. For this unit, I stated clearly that you will do some work that is required of you by page. You have a page number over there, but right now we aren't there yet because we're still writing our first paper. But you have some translations over here that are worth your attention. Formulate writing also, it's another topic that the stock phrase lists plays an important role because you have lots of terms that are coined already that deserve your attention. Over there, you're going to read about the parts of a business letter, which I think it's useful to bear in mind because in the business letter, you will find everything that is theoretical turn into something technical. And you have some links over here. For example, you have some links that you can activate that can help you out, get to documents that can help you solve some of the assignments. This is, I think, very good review. And also you have for greetings and some other uses of language, what we're going to be referring to in a few minutes, which is the formulas used for communication, that they are part of that stock phrases that we need to know. Some more models are offered and some introductory readings on certain uses of closings. You have some suggestions on about things which are useful to say. Others that are like extremely wordy could be probably replaced by others. Some troublesome prepositions that also provide some hard time. So I have a couple of exercises here to do. And also you have, I think this is the only instance of translation work in this unit. You have a letter here. That's in the material, up to page 50, but at around page 50, you're going to run into these pages 50, 51, these two translations, and some more elements of formal and informality. I think, well, we don't use vos, really in this part of the world, but tú, as we mentioned before, you have tú, usted, right? But we don't have vos. But this is the same problem, right? The same problem that you need to know formal and informal, lesser formal, and so forth, right? The use of vosotros is just like very good for reviewing the topic. The use of formal and regional forms. This is something that we always come back to, right? Which we have an activity here also to do that requires you to apply what is learned. And we have some others that I think ends the chapter. Okay. So we're not doing all of them. Right?
Professor Cardenas.
Yes.
Yes, when would this be due, please?
Well, I'm not giving you a date yet because we're not done with our first assignment. You'll have to, yeah, what I'm going to do is receive from you the development of these exercises that you'll do as preparation for another piece of work that could probably become another reaction paper or something else. But what I recommend you is to sit down in the afternoons or evenings and, go over the exercises and solve them. That'll be very good for you. That'll prepare you for a coming assignment. This is
Well,
unit 2. Mhm.
right. No, I thought actually, if you notice at the classroom, I had already uploaded the reaction paper. Since I'm always trying to use all free time I have to work ahead, and I have been working on this chapter too. But that's why, since it had no due date, I was asking when it would be to have it ready. But I am going right now working on this. Thank you very much.
Sure, you bet, you bet. No, not a problem at all. Of course, all of this work will count, as I was stating before. Your development of these exercises, chapter 2, if you want to send those to my mail, I'm fine with that. I will definitely count that, as part of our assessment. Nevertheless, you need to understand that I need to create some actividad de evaluación and some assessment that's 100%, like the one we're doing right now. Okay, because the thing is, probably writing a first reaction paper, 300 words, is not as complicated, but probably in the future we'll have some other, probably longer work, because that's the way it goes, I had this conversation with our friends at continuing education, and for the Diplomado, as I was saying before, it's important for us to go over, at least generate assessment of the work performed, right? Very good. Okay. Good. So coming back to letters. So in business letters, this effusive Spanish salutations, they just don't fit, right? They don't fit. Okay. So probably this slide is too big now. Okay. So the English usage of many nouns as adjectives gives it an efficient and dense aspect. Okay, I'm talking about nouns and adjectives. In Spanish, we can't do this, right? We have to generate new adjectives or explain concepts, and get into some redundancy over there. Okay, take a look. It's always the rendering in Spanish is way longer. Compare English to the left to Spanish on the right. So just to give you an example, look at commuting. So simple word, one word element. So it's in Spanish, traslado diario entre el domicilio y el trabajo. Could you rephrase it some other way? If you can, well, you're gifted. Lucky you. You can't do that. But the rest of the mortals, we have to write it out and find a way for people to understand what we mean, what is meant. Not what we mean, but what is meant in that document or by this person. And that is why a consecutive and simultaneous interpretation from English to Spanish, it's extremely challenging. It's because Spanish is much more longer in terms of wordiness and some other elements. It's not possible for you to provide very exact accounts without getting into a little bit of detail. So you could say, well, the desk officer, funcionario especializado. You cannot leave it just as funcionario because that'll be public servant. It's not a desk officer. Funcionario de secretario del país or something like that, or funcionario especializado, okay? That's something else that deserves an explanation. So don't think of this only as translation work. It could be interpretation work to do. Okay, if you're interpreting, this is going to take a while for you to process and communicate it. So if your author or speaker is in a hurry, then you're going to end up fighting with this person sooner or later. This is the reality, because many of them are in a hurry and they think that you have to hurry like them, and you cannot hurry like them. You have to take a while. And it's important to detect this issue early, because, for instance, I had to interpret for an officer from the UNODC, United Nations for Drug and Crime Organization, and she was in a hurry as I was interpreting, and she wanted to rush me and put pressure on me, and I did it once. The second time she called me, I told her I wasn't available because of the way she wanted to work. She wanted to work in a hurry and under pressure. Some people are like this, but you don't have to be like that. Otherwise, your work is going to be unprofessional. Unprofessional. So yes, you don't have to tell them that they have the wrong attitude or anything, but simply you just tell them, no, no, thank you. No, thank you. I'm not available. I have some other work to do. Okay, that's the case. Okay, background paper, documento de información básica. Okay, so how would you describe a background paper? It's not the same as documento. No, it's not the same. You're going to provide a simplified, abbreviated rendering. That'll be just not good, right? Forcible transfer. Look at that. Traslado de carácter obligatorio. Wow. Wow. That'll be the full explanation of a forcible transfer. But it cannot be a transferencia forzosa. That's something else. And then some layers of meaning are being lost over here. Co-loan. Co-loan. Es un préstamo cofinanciado. Okay, that'll be the proper explanation. And those are the kinds of things that you need to create a glossary for terminology if they are conscious or aware that you need some document to read before, based on what they're going to be delivering in a speech or delivering at a conference, so that you can assist them effectively. But if they want you to go like, into the process just through the sake of, using your expertise, you will not provide a very good interpretation. So you need these people to know that you need at least what they're going to be saying. And if they don't know what they're going to be saying, you should refrain from translating or interpreting for them. Okay. There's some exceptions, however, where Spanish is more efficient and specific. Now, this could be an interesting research topic also, because normally things are the other way around, like I showed you before. Okay, generally it goes like this. You have a shorter bank of terms in English, that become longer as you translate or interpret in Spanish. Generally it goes like this. What you don't find that many is this. Expressions that are shorter in Spanish and longer in English. This is unnatural, or this is against the natural flow or the natural balance between the two languages, according to what comparative linguistics explains. I don't know if you could think of some examples. This would be an excellent explanation or research topic if you could create a bank of terminology that is shorter in Spanish, longer in English, because this would entail going against the flow of language dynamics. I don't know if you could at least provide one example. Maybe we, among all of us, we have some good example, but not an abbreviation, but rather a term that is a single word in Spanish, and it needs further explanation in English.
Morning, Professor. I have an
Mhm.
example, but no, it's not correct. For instance, when you say in Spanish, estrenar, for example, when you use or wear something new, maybe say this is the first time. I don't know if it's the correct word, estrenar.
Mhm. And what was the translation for estrenar again? I mean, could you say again what was your translation for estrenar? Hello? Hello? Hello, hello.
And Professor, and what about appointment?
Mhm. Well, that's
Cita.
mhm.
In Spanish, we say cita, regardless, I think referring to cita, and then in English is appointment.
Appointment, yes. The thing is, what we need is words that have more than one-on-one correspondence. Something that is longer, that requires longer explanations in English. Now, this
Okay.
is terminology research in the field of lexicology. We don't have that many, or if there are any findings, I am sure those findings will generally go into books because this is material that is not ready available for everybody. Not everybody knows of so many words that could be that have this relationship, you know. Yeah. So you have hoof and mouth disease, aftosaf, and pagaré, promissory note, and so forth. Something that simplifies
Professor,
things. Sure.
what about anteayer, the day before yesterday?
Okay. Yeah, probably because since it's abbreviated, I think it's uh, like some abbreviation of antes de ayer. Okay, one term that becomes several words. That's a good example. That I think could probably fit fit in this list, right? Okay, very good. So you see, very easily, uh, this could take a while, but it could be interesting work uh, for analysis, especially if you go into etymology, right? Why is it that this counter current type of phenomenon is or against the current is occurring, that you have these words that are shorter in Spanish? Very good. Okay, I need to also mention here that comparative linguistics makes clear that there is simply no lexical equivalent between two languages because of the culture in which they are embedded. Okay, this is key information and a key takeaway from this certificate program. Since culture rules language and not language, no language rules the culture, what you find is that equivalence is impossible according to comparative linguistics because the cultures differ so much that there's no way you can find a one-on-one equivalence. This is simply ineffective, simplistic solutions to a serious problem. So this happens when technical or scientific progress is made in one culture and generates words to match the needs of those advances, right? Okay, it's very hard to find equivalences. The second language may not have the equivalence available. You need a neologism to deal with that concept. Okay. Could you think of an example concerning technology, for example, out of which you would probably have a new term? At present,
Professor,
sure.
Yes, but, now with the technology, people in Spanish, they are saying, voy a postear esto.
Interesting. Very good.
And I said, what? You know, like, because they are in English, you say I already posted this or I uploaded that. I'm talking about social media too.
Very
And
good.
they are just talking like in a conversation, right? Young people, most of the time, they say, okay, yo posteé esto ayer, voy a postear. And sometimes
Exactly.
they don't even know that it's not Spanish.
Very good.
They think
Exactly.
they're
Those.
Spanish. They believe it's Spanish, but it's not.
Thank you very much for that example. Yeah, it's a clear one. So the activity of uploading something to a platform or system, is there a way in Spanish for us to communicate that very same activity? I don't think so. So that is why we need this equivalent forms that do not exist, and then you create some new term. So if it is a noun, it's a new neologism. If it is
Yeah.
misuse of language, if there is a preferred form, and we pick one like postear and we adapt it to Spanish rules, then we have an Anglicism. We have some Anglicism over there. Probably there is a form, but I cannot think of one.
Yes, Professor, because it's the action of sending something, right? But it's send also, it's so general. It's very general. It's just, and postear is something like very specific. It's not, it's uploading something into a platform or social media. So enviar as it is, because it's un verbo, also to post. Enviar, it doesn't really, you are not really giving the right action. I don't know what that you are doing. Just enviar. I don't know.
Yeah, could be the case of probably I don't know, maybe post, publicar en línea. Could be, I don't know, I'm not so sure. That could take some analysis. Well,
yes.
Very good. So the needs of neologisms, that's where they come in, exactly, because we are lacking the terms to mean what we need to communicate. Okay, so we have a couple of examples here.
I think it's part of our Panamanian culture, since we are so influenced by the Americans, to just like adjust the word for us to use it. I mean, we say parking and we say other words, chatear, and other words that come into the language through the influence of other sources. And we, as Panamanians, we have the tendency of adopting those terminologies and use it into our Spanglish. So
Exactly. And things get even worse if you go to other places which are way more influenced by English, American English, such as Puerto Rico, where they say things like pichar or hanguear and other verbs that we don't use, simply because the shades of meaning are, over there, like clearer coming from English. I think that's part of the problem also, cultural influence and so forth. We have serious problems sometimes with these expressions. For example, gamification, okay? Ludificación, I think it's completely different. And I've seen gamificación. They've said in some documents that I've read directly. And all they do is that they turn that into a CION wording or spelling at the end, instead of going for a completely different meaning, or words like
I noticed
ludificación.
that there's sometimes you hear people say, están en locación. And I don't understand. I think it's localización or locación. And I think it's la locación and it's la localidad.
Yeah, the geographical location.
Right, and I noticed that's something that is very much used. Maybe I misunderstood, but um, that's one thing that I noticed that, and I'm sorry, I think it's not appropriate, but it's
Professor, and what about selfie and or streaming?
Yeah, those are challenging because the selfie is a noun that requires a neologism that catches in our language to mean the same. And the other one you said streaming, that's more like verbal. Uh,
Mhm.
It's probably some other word is necessary. So I don't think we'll come up with an equivalent form. It's very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the way I see it. I don't know, maybe you have a different idea. So that is why it's
Well,
important to look at specialized
for
dictionaries.
selfie, for selfie, I would just use autorretrato, but it is not that catchy, and it is an informal language also. The
Mhm.
way that
That's
the
true.
people just talk every time on a daily basis.
Very good. Yeah. Yeah. Look at, for example, playlist. The RAE is alternative lista de producción, de reproducción, sorry. Playlist. But it's not as effective. And I think maybe it doesn't mean necessarily the same.
Yeah, when we try to translate that, I mean, the meaning sounds for us different.
Same as in, look at podcast. Well, we struggled with that one, and there was no way as to mean that in the rise possible equivalence is podcast, almost the same, just with a tilde. Okay. Look at, for example, spoilers, a movie spoiler, a story spoiler, because the rise alternative is the stripe. That doesn't have anything to do with it, really, because it's something else. Or it
Sounds awful.
implies something else.
Mm. But I think that with the with RAE, I think by usage, sooner or later they're going to accept some of the terms.
Yeah, they have to. There's no choice. They have no choice. Okay. Look at hashtag, etiqueta, and so forth. So many of them are related to technologies. They have we have no equivalence for them. Okay. I'm giving you some recent neologisms in terms from 20th, 21st century. Modern neologisms from Spanish emerge from specific concrete areas that are expanding. Food, music, colloquial, U.S. Hispanic culture. So you see here, for instance, from social and cultural background, you find Boricua. It's a person from Puerto Rican descent, a Chilango, native from or inhabitant of Mexico City. Güey, you see here, is a dude or man, okay, through Mexican influence. Papi, it's a term German for father, partner, now friend. Some people are complaining that we are catching some of these expressions, but these are recent neologisms, new terms to are brought in communication. You have lucha libre; those are in English now, so these are common in English now. Okay, have brought into English, into American English. American English did not use many of these before. Okay. Boricua, Chilango, Way, Papi, Lucha Libre are this. Interjections also, such as, for instance, you say caramba or órale or something, so, wow, okay, or go. Or Dios mío, oh my God, ¿qué pasa? So what's up? ¿Qué pasa? So many of them are now in English. food and drink vocabulary, you have now better known or more used in the American English, tres leches, elote, also birria, okay, the meat, cuchifritos, of this. Some of these have been adopted now in American English. So in other cases, a culture may have a rich variety of words to describe an important or frequently occurring phenomenon. Snow among skiers, or bananas in the tropics, or penguins varieties in the Antarctic, because this is the context. But the second language may only have one general word to cover the whole category, right? And this creates a limitation. And what it does is that it kicks you out of a topic, because if people are talking about hoja de palma real, and all you know is the traditional palm tree leaf, and people talk about palma real and things that you're going to be out of a communication because you don't know what they're talking about. You don't know. It's because they come from the same context. Okay, come from the same context, and they know that, and you know it's dialectal to some extent sometimes, because they're going to be using some domesticated terms from maybe some source or heritage language. Maybe we have the case of folklore. Okay, that's where it comes culture and heritage. Within a culture, it tends to create many types of constructions that fall in metalinguistics, that's beyond linguistics. Those are the word plays, the puns, and other idiosyncrasies, which may have equivalents or may not have equivalents, right? Okay. Examples of these, there could be quite a few of them, and we use them in everyday communication, but probably we don't pay enough attention to them. Even the kind of humor is affected by folklore. So this is the translator's task. What is the solution for a translator? Now, application. Translators should take advantage of the comparative work done between the two languages and gain a deeper understanding of similarities and differences between the two languages, and pick up specific translation techniques. Okay. Sometimes it's necessary to modulate when things are very cultural or contextualized. You have to modulate, because modulation is exactly that. It's adjusting meaning so that meaning is preserved, but you do it in a creative way. That's modulation. That's modulation. So you use your interlocutor's skill, linguistic skill, you see. So we have some translation problems and techniques derived from comparative linguistics. Of course, this is all coming from comparative linguistics. And when I say that, I'm again, telling you that we have to go into Vasquez Sayora material in order to further on our comprehension, right, on the topic or our understanding. Okay. Now, these are categories that can cause confusion for a translator because the rules are not clear, right? And there are exceptions. Now, one case is, for example, proper names. Okay. So we have the names of people are not translated. Okay. John Smith's son cannot be Juan Hijo de Herrero. Okay, that cannot be. We cannot translate names like that, Good. However, names of kings are frequently translated, especially into Spanish, if the name has an obvious equivalent in the target language. Okay. Fictional names also have the same situation, right? For example, in the Lord of the Rings movies, I noticed that they translate to Spanish some of the terms coming from the originals in English. For example, el abismo de Helm, or Helm's Pit. They translated it as la fortaleza de Cuernavilla. Okay, That's the terminology they use over there. It's a coin name to mean that. The Cuernavilla to mean it's like far away, out of reach, somewhere out of reach. So that's one case I found, and so forth. So they use a lot of amplification and a lot of modulation for this purpose. The names of saints, okay, usually do have equivalents on R translated. So that's the case of, we have Saint Jerome, we know it's San Jerónimo, patrón de los traductores, all right, just to give an example. And we have others that entail some historical figures, Archimedes, Archimedes for us in Spanish, Alejandro Magno, for Alexander the Great. Now, all of these names will then be required to be translated. Eduardo IV and Enrique III for Henry III, or Esteban, for instance, George III, Jorge III, James I, Jaime I, Elizabeth II, Elizabeth II, etc., and so forth. So we have different monarchs and their names, for example, here, presented. They require to be translated as we deal with them. Same as in the case of the names of saints. Okay. Things change when we refer to first names and living per people. Most of the people that we are showing here, they have passed already. They all passed, I think, here in this list. If I'm not wrong, they're all passed. So they could be translated. If you are alive, you cannot be translated. That's the fast and easy rule. In the case of all of these saints, we have all of these saints in Spanish, right? Those require translation. So Henry II, Saint Henry II, Saint Eduviges, Saint Edward, Saint Edmundus, Saint Helen, and then Saint Richard of Wessex, Saint Ferdinand III, okay, and then we have Saint Wenceslaw of Bohemia, and so forth. Saint Augustine also. Okay. So we have of these characters. Okay, let's try to measure up, see if we are, in shape. Tell me, how will you translate these historical figures already passed, of course, because past people or the ones who have passed already can be translated, especially if they are important figures. Could you please let me know what your possible renderings for this would be?
Well, I think that in the first part, well, the one that I recognize is Christopher Columbus.
Yeah, what about the others? Would you give it a try?
Guillermo will be William the First of England. His Católicos should be, I think, the Catholic kings.
Yeah, and remember that king and queen, they have different roles. That's why they have different names. I mean, different titles. So that could be the Catholic monarchs or the Catholic monarchy.
Okay.
Yes, I know that Carlomagno is Charlemagne, something like that. I don't know if it's
Very good. Thank you.
yes. And Mohammed, Mahoma is like something like Muhammad.
Very good. Exactly. Mohammed. That's
Yes.
right. Okay. I think we did the very first column. What about this modern or what they call early modern?
That would be Martin Luther,
Very good.
and then Adam Smith will be the same, I would say. I mean, I don't see any change on that. Henry VIII,
Good.
Charles I of Spain, and fifth of Germany.
Thank you.
That would be Philip II. The other one would be Elizabeth I of England. Soliman, that I'm not sure about, and then George Washington stays the same.
Okay, so um what about our last the translation is Solomon the Magnificent. Just like as it is, the Magnificent is not like Solomon the Great, but the Magnificent.
The Magnificent, okay.
Yeah, very good. Yeah. So Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, exactly. Present day Turkey, exactly. Solomon the Magnificent. Okay, what about contemporary period?
Napoleon Bonaparte, I thought it was just Napoleon, something like short.
So as these are more recent, it's even harder to translate. So that's the situation here with many of them. Very good. Okay, thank you. So we have an exception to these, okay? And it's important for us to take note of this exception. So the Pope is the only living person whose name is always translated, right? Always. Okay, so present day Pope, his name I think is in English. So well, that will could be translated to Spanish. I don't know. Could you give it a try? Because I remember during the days of Francis, Pope Francis, right? You know, it was Francisco, but in English, he appeared as Pope Francis everywhere. So, what is present day Pope? How will you translate his or his name?
I know that is León 14 in Spanish.
So yeah, the papacy has some special status here. I think
Yes.
Leon the 14th, you know, that is, you know, okay, because it's some name but his real name is, what's the Pope's name, present day? But not Leo, of course. His real name.
Robert Francis Prevost.
Prevost.
Yes.
So should we
It's
say
American
Pope Robert? Pope Robert. How will you say that in Spanish? Papa Roberto. Would you be okay with that? Or it should be Papa Robert? What do you think?
No, I guess it would be Papa Roberto.
Yeah, that's the thing. And you know, I haven't found any of that for some reason. I think he's not that popular anymore. Or maybe he's not as popular because people don't know him. At least they don't know him very much yet. So the prior pope was pretty popular. I think just for being from Latin America. This one is American, but it's not as popular. Well, people don't know him yet. Well, he doesn't say much. That's part of the problem. Or what he says, people don't listen to him very much. At least not yet. Or he hasn't come out to the forefront, right? To speak, bravely, as Francis did. So that'll be Papa Roberto. Okay, Roberto Prevost. Okay, interesting. Okay. Other titles, such as nobility, usually have a version in the target language, okay, that should be used. And equivalent impact effect should be considered always. Sometimes using the translated term creates an awkward situation and a different impact. So in Latin America, many professions use titles linked to name. This is always what we call un quebradero, de cabeza. It's trouble. You have someone named Ingeniero Juan González or la abogada María Pérez, arquitecto Samuel Trinca. So to render this as with the English equivalence sounds odd, should not be attempted unless it's necessary for the full meaning of a text. So where no English equivalent is known, as in for licenciado or don, the source language original may be used or may be omitted depending on the situation. So probably you have to leave it as it is, like Ingeniero Juan González. You will not write Engineer Juan González. It's just that's, I think, beyond the purpose. Unless it's, I think, something that requires their qualification. Or Juan González is an engineer, and so and so. And Maria Perez is a lawyer. X, Y, and Z piece of information. But if you have to write it just for adding it in text, according to what we're reading here, what we are learning here is that we should not render this title with their English equivalent because that'll be awkward, because of awkwardness. Could be something awkward. And we should pay attention and try to preserve the source language original, or leave out some piece of information depending on the case. No don or no licenciado and so forth. Okay, here we have some cases of how important it is. So if we are going to refer to these important authors and singers and artists, most of them will go by Mr. But since in most of the literature, the idea is to relate them to relate to them, there will be no title. Okay? There will be no title. You cannot say like Dr. Sayed Mohammed, okay, even though he holds a PhD. Simply Sayed Mohammed, or Michael Jordan. Even though he could hold the title, we will not say Mr. Michael Jordan, not even that. So sometimes the titles could be overlooked and not even mentioned. Okay. So the challenges start when we have to deal with formal figures that they hold a title that is part of their name, as in the case of, we were saying, Papa Roberto. Papa Roberto, that sounds strange. Papa Francisco was very established and widely used. And in English writings, you read Pope Francis. But what happens if you have this, you have a hierarchy? There's a hierarchy of the Catholic Church here and another one of the Protestant Church. So they all hold titles. They all hold important positions. So look at this. How would you translate these cases? For example, Eugenio Sanchez, BR, what's BR? Right, I'm gonna leave you that as homework, okay? For you to go into some occupations. For instance, it's easier to know that Enfermero Tomás Gómez or Técnica Emilia Torrente, Professor Jaime Rodriguez, but some other occupations may not be as clear. You have a BR over there, that's an interesting one for you to look into. We have others here, down here, for example, help me out with Axel Houghton.
Okay, I researched for the BR, maybe could be a religious title like brother, Eugenio Sanchez, brother.
It's an occupation. BR is an occupation. But I think it's worth the effort of looking into that, because chances are we're gonna run into that sooner or later. What about Peter Hay? What's that? And remember, don't think only as a translator. Also think as an interpreter. What could be interpretation for Peter Hay?
Peter Hay, Master in Science.
Master in Science, exactly. In Spanish?
Magister en Ciencias.
En Ciencias, exactly. What about Karen Tomlinson?
Professor, I found something for BR, but I don't know, it's kind of weird. It's broker.
Okay, that could be the case. Okay.
Broker, yes, more in the States maybe than here. But here people use the word broker here in Panama as something.
No, but this one is an occupation, and it's an
Yes,
occupation, yeah. In
Yes.
Spanish,
Mm-hmm.
in Spanish. What about Karen Tomlinson, RN? What's
Corredor.
that?
I think that for broker is corredor de bolsa.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm not going to tell you that today. Maybe we can, discuss this tomorrow about that BR. But for example,
Yes.
RN, do you know RN?
Registered nurse.
Registered nurse. Okay, thank you.
Nurse.
Okay. And we have William Sellers.
Maybe engineer.
He is an engineer. That is right. That is
Mhm.
right. Okay, well, we're going to leave the BR over there, you know, as homework.
That's
See for
bachiller, BR,
what is that?
bachiller.
Okay, okay, you got it. Exactly. It has to do, yeah, that's right. Bachiller, right. So it's what it is degree title of a basic, very basic level. Exactly. That's why it's not so common, because very few people write to them or address a letter to someone with a lower academic degree. Exactly. So concerning these other figures, this gives us an idea that we would sometimes have a hard time even with these names, what to call people. This is important. So, for instance, at universities, we have all of these address terms which are necessary. Otherwise, you are insulting someone, right? So you have Rector Magnifico, right? So you have the abbreviation is Rector Macco, Rectora, Señor, and then you provide the in the event of deans or managers or vice deans or so forth. So this is the, so what would be the counterpart in English? Could you help me? So what would be your rendering for Rector Magnifico if you had to translate a letter or interpret that at a meeting?
Well, I guess there should be a difference between the speech rendering and the written one. And I think that it's addressed in a greeting, for example, or in addressing it to a greeting, a rector magnificent, and they would probably use the Latin word, I think, because of the degree of formality in the written form. That's my perception of it.
Could it be magnificent chancellor?
All right. Do you have other ideas? Anybody else?
Well, head chairman could be also for the university.
Remember that everything revolves around meaning, and we have to make sure everybody understands us. So, such a thing as magnifico, that I think is like outlandish, really, in English. Uh, simply president of the university or university president. That'll be more appropriate, more natural, and more accurate. And we'll make sure everybody knows what we're talking about. So, yeah, those formalities, I think, won't fit an effective interpretation of any kind. So you'll have to probably leave that out. That's my suggestion. We have the same here with civilian treatment. Look at this. So most of these diputados, alcaldes, presidentes, ministros, they expect to be treated as excelentísimos, excelentísimo señor, excelentísima señora. What do you think about them? What do you think about these formalities? Is there a way to translate this or interpret this? What do you think?
At least not in English. They don't use the type of formalities, and those are precisely the type of social registers that affect and could affect the translations being made in regards to a classification or a treatment someone with such a hierarchy deserves.
Can we use your excellence? There would be no gender on that, or could be that sometimes people call like secretaries or important people sir or madame also.
Or simply Mr., right? Mr. For respect, because you won't call like president only, it's Mr. President. So a little bit more formal. That elevates it a little bit more than simply the title. So Mr. President. So in the case of a female president, how would you address her? Female president, for formality, what will you call her?
Madam President?
Yeah, probably Madam President. That hasn't been the case yet in the United States, at least. They say they are the cradle of democracy. They've never had a female president. At least we used to have one over here, right? But yeah, this is something unexpected in American English because there's never been a Madam President anywhere. Okay. Okay. Very good.
Professor, I have a question concerning all this. Because we were saying that English is much more direct. And do we have to take this into account when we translate all these words, because they are sometimes very fancy? As illustrísimo, I don't know, excelentísimo, some words that, maybe in English, these words don't make sense to them because it's a more direct language. What do you think about this? What is your opinion?
Personally, what I think is, for instance, if you have to translate correspondence into English, and that has to be directed to officials of government in the United States or the UK, just to give an example, we won't be able to do it unless we have some model or some example of the kind of letter that is that we require to translate. That's the only way. If you have a model, then you can do it correctly. Otherwise, we will make mistakes because we're unfamiliar with the proper protocol. Protocol matters a lot because that could be the difference between finding solutions or no solution at all. Breaking the protocol is sometimes very harmful. So I must say, a diligent translator needs to be also a researcher, because this person needs to find models of correspondence and even emails. Because look, what we don't do anymore is send letters, but we do send emails. And a good translator must keep track of print email models of the kind of communication that could be required. and include proper protocol terminology, right? Instead of Excelentísimo Señor, that would be Mr. President X or Madame President X. In the event, Ilustre Señor, then a proper protocol form could be, I don't know, that depends on who we're writing to. That's the first thing. We need some reference information. And books do not have this kind of information. Tell me a book where you think you will find this information. I don't think this is going to be possible because this information is intercultural and it's interlanguage, interlingual. There is little chance, or to put it in other words, fat chance that we're going to find a protocol terminology in books that compares or contrasts from comparative linguistics, English and Spanish. This is the work of the translator. Translator is the only one who would care about this material. This type of things are probably buried in a repository, a digital repository, but in the form of letters, communication examples, printed emails, and that kind of thing. And that the only way to access this is doing research. Look at this one. So formal community. Yes.
Yeah, once I was translating a document, and actually had to do with delegate, and what I did was find the culture, going to what charges they have in the States, and I translated Treasury Department official, but I didn't use delegate because I was playing safe and going into the language. That's what I did.
Okay.
And I think that's what we should do. With those difficult terms, we should go into the culture and see what they have and use what they have, because we want them to understand what we are trying to say, what the original source is trying to say.
Exactly. Better safe than sorry. Exactly. Very good. Okay. Look at this. Doña. Do you really think there is something that translates that or it's equivalent? I cannot think of anything that ma'am or Mr. And those don't, I think, necessarily always fulfill the job, the mission, of communicating this. Now, when we come to ecclesiastical or religious authorities, it's even more difficult because we have the Catholic Church in the United States, same as in Canada, for example, not the case of the UK, but it's present in most of the Western civilization countries. And then we know that I was watching the other day the movie, not the other day, but at the end of last year, the movie named, okay, let me just remember what that was. The Conclave. I was watching the movie The Conclave. And in The Conclave, of course, they use the proper adverse terms. Your grace, your eminence, and so forth. But those do not come to mind all the time because we don't move in those circles, We don't move in those circles. So you have to translate Reverendísimo Señor. Then this is a headache because you need to look for the proper term. Okay, it's not an easy task. And then we have these abbreviated forms. Okay. And then addressing the hierarchy according to their position. That could be like a major mistranslation, okay? If you do not know what would be an equivalence. So, and then your work is not good. You have to send a letter to El Nuncio Apostólico, and then you happen to call him Mr. X, then we have a problem here. because there must be some formulaic form to address his figure according to the hierarchy. All right, so here we go. So this is an interesting task. I would like you guys, if possible, for tomorrow to come up with some of these terms. I'm gonna ask you, and I would like you to tell me if you learned or you did research from any. I would recommend very strongly going into Word Reference, okay, as a portal. That could be a very good potential source of research or analysis on what would be appropriate or proper protocol terms in writing in the event of sending an email or drafting a letter or sending some communication, some official communication in English, because you never know what will be necessary required of you as a translator. Okay, tomorrow we'll carry on with this discussion because time is almost up. It's 11:59 according to my clock. And I think we're about to end today's session. Suffice to say that, well, we already have some work appointed. Keep on writing and producing your reaction paper. If you haven't done so, please go ahead and do so and make sure everybody send your work, your corresponding work tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll carry on with this topics connected. And if you could bring some protocol terms for writing, for interpreting, that'll be a good contribution. I don't know if there is anything else to say from the coordinators.
Joel, are you there? Oh, no, he's there.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, go ahead.
Do we have any announcement on behalf of the coordinator before closing?
Well, no announcements. I just, well, we have a lot to investigate. So I have a lot of noise, background noise. So, well, we have a lot to investigate. Have a nice afternoon and God bless you all. Thank you, Professor Cardenas, for so much information and all of the knowledge you have shared.
You bet.
Okay.
See you tomorrow.
Thank you. So don't forget to complete to fill out the attendance of today that is in the chat box, and don't forget to contact us if there is any challenge. See you tomorrow. Have a wonderful and amazing rest of the day.